Before we start the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I appreciate all the support I received from you. And as always, all the information in my videos is rumors taken from the internet or the street. I'm not saying the information is fact.
Pick your mans up.
Yeah, just because people used to come through shooting at us every day. Yeah, this block, words can't even explain. Can't even explain.
Yeah, man. Little School Valley, 05 way on money.
Young Money, man. They in the building.
600 boy, LA, man. LA Capone, man. Get it to him, man. OC2 boys, man. Team
Roger number 9, man. Number 9 shooter, you hear me?
Hey, bitch, this little bitch. Yeah. What the fuck is wrong with you? Hey, I am Brick Squad. Yeah, Brick Squad, boy. What the fuck is you talking about, boy?
You have to be willing to die or go to jail for 100 years if that's the lane that you're stepping in. You have to understand that whether you 15, 16, you got to think like a man. You know what I'm saying?
So don't be in it. Oh, you're not? Why does everybody say you're only 16 years old?
They say what they want to say.
How old are you?
300.
The story of Pockettown. This is the story of Pockettown, a story of a long war with their worst rivals, Sircon City gangsters. You will learn about the rich history of both Pockettown and Sircon City dating back to the 80s and 90s, with drug lords like Nate Hill. You will also learn about how the war with Sircon started, other enemies, and of course about today's Pockettown. Two members who will be in focus are Spook and Denny G from Pockettown, two recognized outstanding members with bodies under their belts, two members who were incredibly close to KTS Vaughn, Dre, Rio G, and other members that we will get into. We will of course also talk about what is very hot right now, and it is of course the war between Pockettown and No Limit. I will begin this video by telling the story of Pockettown and its members. One thing you should know about Pockettown is that it was not a lone man who formed the gang or gave the name. The name comes from the area where the gang is housed, Pockettown or the Pocket. The area was named because of the shape of the area. It is shaped like a pocket. The area that Pockettown controls stretches from 69th Street and Kimbark Avenue in the northeast, 71st Street, Cottage Grove Avenue and South Chicago Avenue on the west, and 75th Street, South Chicago Avenue and Woodlawn Avenue on the south. It is part of the Greater Grand Crossing community area. I know that Pockettown is technically not the east side but more the far south side, but I will say the east side anyway. Pockettown's territory borders gangs such as E-Block/KTS, Gotti World, Malltown, and of course Sircon City gangsters who are both surrounded by both allies and enemies. You could literally walk down East 73rd Street and suddenly you're on Sircon City's territory, meaning enemy territory for members of Pockettown. What many do not know is that Pockettown is divided into two different groups. There is Pockettown, which are new breeds, and then there is Pockettown/CTG, who are GDs. However, as I understand it, the groups are barely divided. They are basically the same thing, share the same territory and hang out with each other. Back in the 80s and 90s, Pockettown was mostly new breeds, but today the majority is GD, especially the younger generation. Like many other gangs such as No Limit and Sircon City gangsters, Pockettown has a rich history that goes far back in time. Pockettown as a gang have been around since the late 80s, and just like many of the other gangs on the east side like No Limit, they focused on the money and drugs, not on weapons and murder, even though shootings and murders occurred to protect the drug trade. However, it is not possible to talk about Pockettown's history without mentioning Nate Hill, the kingpin in Pockettown in the late 80s. However, Nate Hill was not only big in Pockettown or Chicago, but he was actually one of the biggest cocaine dealers in the entire United States in the late 80s and early 90s. According to police documents, Nate Hill and his organization moved several thousands of kilos of cocaine a month in Chicago, making more than $100 million in profit, and were even on the US top 15 most wanted list. Nate was really a born businessman. He really knew how to take advantage of opportunities and turn it into money. He grew up in Pockettown on the 71st Street in Kimbark and grew up in a poor household in the 70s. In the winter there was hardly any heat in the house and his mother had to work hard to provide food on the table. His father subscribed to the family once his mother got sick, and that's the time Nate started making money on the street. It all started with a guy owing him $300 for a stolen car. However, instead of giving money, this person offered $300 worth of cocaine, which Nate approved. Nate doubled her money after just a few hours by sitting around at something called Base Camp, which was a house in Pockettown where people came in to buy and free base cocaine. From there, it all started. Nate continued to buy and sell. He laundered his money through a bus company and got his drugs from cartels from California and Mexico. In Nate Hill's book about his life, Story of a Chicago Kingpin, he told that he supplied the Black Disciples, Black P. Stones, Vice Lords, new breeds and gangster disciples with thousands of kilos of cocaine from the mid-80s to 1995s, when he himself claims that he stopped. Once he quit, Chicago had a huge drought on cocaine, which shows how much goods Nate was moving around in the city. In 1996, the government hit him with a thick indictment accusing Nate of supplying more than 3 tons of cocaine to 2 of Chicago's largest street gangs, the Gangster Disciples and Vice Lords, between 1987 and 1995. At the time, there were demands to pay street taxes to sell drugs in Chicago, and after gangs believed that Nate Hill left Chicago in the early 90s to avoid paying taxes, he was actually shot in the back and legs. Nate himself also put a hit out on guys from other gangs who tried to kidnap him and his family, rob him or kill him. 3 of the hits he put out resulted in 2 murders, while the third survived. Before Nate was later found and arrested by police and later sentenced to life in prison, he moved to Africa, Guinea, where he hid because he was scared. Just as I mentioned earlier, Nate was a born businessman, which he also showed in Guinea, where he sold coffee for several $1 million. He was also able to bring tribal leaders together in Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia to aid in his venture. This brought about an immense amount of pride, as he was no longer poisoning his communities with drugs, but helping build up his people out of poverty and feed their malnourished bodies. In addition to selling drugs, Nate also had a great interest in cars and even worked as a mechanic. He organized several street races in Pockettown and around on the south side, and Nate was actually the reason why people started hanging out on the far south side of Chicago with people racing, having a good time and hanging out at the White Castle on 79th and Stony Island. Another big interest Nate had was music, and he would actually lay the foundation for the huge music culture that has existed in both Pockettown and KTS since the early 2000s until today. In 1991, which was around the time Nate was shot and temporarily paralyzed, Nate left Chicago for New York and Los Angeles to set up an office for his own record label company called Pockettown Records, a label that was really invested in with drug money and also used as money laundering. His sister was the front of the record label while Nate was in Africa on the run. His sister and 2 others were actually convicted of money laundering. Pockettown Records produced hits such as Not in Nice and Crucial Conflicts, and even produced Lisa Ray's first movie with MC8 and Bernie Mac, but the film was never released because the FBI stopped it. Jojo Capone then accused MC8 of snitching on both Nate Hill and Gunsmoke from Pockettown, which I will tell you about in another story.
That's what the fuck I needed. Niggas talking about the pocket. Niggas talking about I don't fuck with the pocket. I'm with the king of the motherfucker. Huh? Welcome home, my motherfucking brother, man.
That's right.
Gunsmoke, nigga.
Glad to be home with my people, man.
You dig what the fuck
With
we
my
saying?
folks.
Stood 10 toes down solid.
No doubt.
Y'all talk all this goof ass shit. Y'all mad y'all can't catch no skeletons in my closet. We ain't got no skeletons, G.
Don't have them.
We stand 10 toes down, man. Ain't no motherfucking skeletons in our closet, man. Suck ass niggas. They mad, G, cause I'm reading Nate's book and Nate, pull a skirt up on the bitch MC8. The nigga in the hood with us, remember?
That nigga trying to testify on them people.
Come on, man.
You know what I'm saying? Why wouldn't he expose them?
Why wouldn't I pull a bitch skirt up? And you just come home 22.
I just got to play the song for that bitch ass nigga. Really?
That's what I said. Come on, little bro. Come on, little bro. Come on, little bro. Get in here before it go off. Get in. Look, my little brother right here. 15 years, 20.
That nigga, hey, Tony Compton Most Wanted, that's my motherfucking government name.
You dig what I'm saying? That's his motherfucker.
I was born and raised as Compton.
You dig?
Shit.
The king of the pocket, you talking this shit. My little brother and my other brother here, goddamn it, stood 10 toes down. I ain't gonna say it. What case was y'all on, G?
Shit. Dude case.
Big homie. Free Larry Bernard motherfucking Hoover, man. And there's two of them that's on the case and they home. And who they with?
And we love Larry.
To death.
We love Larry.
Blow up.
What the fuck is wrong with these suckers? I'm finna put up that docket number from Rodney Ellis. And y'all gonna see what the fuck I said about that hoe ass rapper actor. I'm not letting up on you, bitch. I'm not letting up on your hoe ass. And I'm finna go live with one of my family members from LA in '89. The nigga told on her on some gunplay, but you're gonna hear from her words. I ain't gonna say shit else. I'm gonna let her tell y'all herself.
Now we've got into the 21st century's history of Pockettown, and of course it's largely about the brothers and leaders of Pockettown, Lil Lay and King Rico. Lil Lay and King Rico, who by the way are brothers of Rio G from KTS who were shot dead in the summer of 2020, were really two menaces that put the whole East Side in fear. Both are responsible for multiple murders and the formation of other gangs. Lil Lay was born in 1989 and his older brother Rico was born in 1987. Their name, especially Lil Lay name, has resonated since the early 2000s when they were only 12 to 14 years old. They even had them older from the neighborhood in fear. Like Lil Lay, Rico, and Corey, Mike Larry, Pez and a couple of other Pockettown teens were after the money. During their upbringing in Pockettown, it was the OGs who withdrew all the money, which Lay, Rico and the others did not accept. They wanted a piece of the pie and therefore started robbing the old heads, stealing cars, selling drugs and whatnot. This led to fights and shootings between the older and new generation, and after a few years, around the years 2005 to 2006, the new and today known generation had taken over Pockettown. Lil Lay older brother, King Rico or Money Man, taught Lil Lay at an early age how to sell drugs and steal cars. Before we get to the murders that both Rico and Lil Lay were involved in, we have to talk about the music. Just as I mentioned earlier, Nate Hill invested a lot of money in music, which laid the foundation for the importance of music in Pockettown to this day. As you all know, Lil Lay was a rapper and released a very known mixtape in Chicago, Chicago Menace, which consisted of several good records. It was really old school hip hop. Many of the songs on the mixtape were freestyle, and many of them he actually recorded the 100s right next to Alt Geld Gardens. As much as Lil Lay was from Pockettown, he was also from Concordia. He even graduated from Dubois. Lay also collaborated with other artists like King Samson, who I will make a story about soon. Lil Lay is not the only rapper from Pockettown. They have Denny G that we will come to later, Lil Don, Lil Raw, Lil Art, Jojo Capone, K-Dog, Twin Glocks and Tone Montana. Then you have several other rappers from KTS like Vaughn, Dre and Prince. There are a bunch of them. Music is very important to them. They understand it can generate money and fame. Unless you count Lil Lay and KTS Vaughn, Denny G is the most famous and in my opinion the most talented rapper from Pockettown, with hit songs like It's Going Down, I Can't Win for Losing, and Drug Dealer, which was released in 2012 and 2013, which were the years when drill music really exploded in Chicago.
You ain't went through shit I've been through. You ain't did the shit that I do. But disrespect Lil Ronnie Mo, you gon' see him before I do. Sneak this and get a nigga whack, better hope that nigga ain't true. Or I'm on your ass like a thirsty bitch that see green come out.
We gotta say a lot of bitches on her name. Pretty in the face and way smarter than you think. Got a nice ass body, pretty eyes that change colors. She pretty like my mother. Yeah, I love her. Yeah, I said I love her. Then I smell a motherfucker. Got a best friend named Mercedes, that's better than grown ladies. Hair long as hell, look like she been growing it since the 80s. I call her a lot of bitches, so sometimes Mercedes hate me. She a pretty young goon, but real talk, I think she crazy. Got a thick ass chick, yeah, she go back these shields. See her.
For those of you who have seen the story of Jaro City, know that ABM and Pockettown were cool, and both gangs, and especially Lil Lay used to throw huge parties on the south side. Lil Lay, Corey and King Rico even used to help ABM to fight, shoot and rob people from Murder Town, which resulted in Lil Lay allegedly killing Dro from Murder Town, which resulted in the formation of Jaro City in 2005. However, some believe that this is not true and that it was either the Moise or Cranktown killed him. For those of you who have seen the story of Jaro City also know that Jarvis from ABM was cool with both Pockettown and Sircon City gangsters, two gangs that are at war with each other. In December 2005, Jarvis was at a party with Sircon City members. After a while at the party, Lil Lay and some other Pockettown members knocked and wanted to come in. However, Jarvis, someone whom Lil Lay considered his friend, said he was not allowed in. My theory is that Jarvis did not want anything to go down at the party, because something would have happened had it been his fault. Instead, he would lose his own life, because Lil Lay returned to the party after a while and Lil Lay shot Jarvis straight in the face, who was pronounced dead on the scene. Jaro City was later formed to honor Jarvis' memory, and this is why people say that Lil Lay invented Jaro City. There was no great extent of revenge after the murder of Jarvis, at least not to the extent as we see today. It may have been because gun violence was not as common at the time as it is today. At that time, members could still solve problems by talking to each other. They were not as excited about Get Back as we can see today after the Get Back gang era. After the murder, Lil Lay still came through shooting up ABM over and over. In the end, however, ABM retaliated by killing Lil Albert from Pockettown, but it would quickly backfire on ABM as Pockettown got rid of another member. After this, ABM pretty much waved the white flag, because many of their members were not into sliding as they are today. For them it was still about money and drugs. As many of you know, Lil Lay had a huge reputation on the street. Jarvis and Dro were not his only rumored bodies. Lay was rumored to have multiple bodies. However, a few of his bodies are also claimed by others. Another he is rumored to have killed is Darren's, also known as Lil Mo, from Sircon City Gangsters, in July 2009. And yes, this is the same Lil Mo as in Lyron. However, many believe that it was No Love City that was behind the murder of Lil Mo. and many even believe that Tone Bone from NLC was charged and convicted for the murder and got sentenced to 60 years for the murder. However, this seems very unlikely since Tone Bone, whose real name was Antonio Scott, has no record of this. He cannot be found among Chicago's prison inmates. There is one Antonio Scott who was arrested a month after the murder of Lil Mo. However, it was for an armed robbery. Another thing that speaks against this is that Antonio was only 13 years old at the time of the murder, which makes the whole thing even more unlikely. The murder is really a mystery. Some believe that Lil Lay was responsible for it while others believe that it was No Love City. Lil Lay is also rumored to have shot up Sircon City several times, robbed people from the area and allegedly shot and killed Julian from Sircon City. However, much of this information is very uncertain as it happened 10 to 15 years ago. The only thing you really know for certain is that he killed Jarvis, since 600 Breezy openly confirmed it on Twitter. Back in 2005, when Lil Lay killed Jarvis from ABM at the Sircon City party, the beef between Pockettown and Sircon was not as violent as it would later be. Some members were even cool with each other. The gangs even used to organize basketball matches between each other, where Sircon City came over into the pocket and played. Fights could happen from time to time between the gangs, especially when they played basketball. And in September 2006 it escalated and the war started. On September 22, 2006, Pockettown and Sircon City organized a basketball game against each other in Pockettown. Just like I mentioned earlier, there have been several matches between them, and it was common for fights to happen. However, that day it escalated. Kevin, Demetrius and 3 others from Sircon City came over to Pockettown to face 5 from the Pocket in a basketball game with a bet of $200 for the winner. 3 of those who played for the Pocket were Lil Lay, his brother King Rico, and Corey. However, there was never a winner in the game because it never had time to finish. A dispute between the 2 gangs erupted, which led to a fight. Shortly after the fight, someone from the Pocket started letting off shots toward Demetrius from Sircon City. Demetrius, who had parked his car in the area, left the car and ran back towards Sircon City. The day after the basketball game, it would all escalate even more. Lil Lay was riding around in traffic when a member from Outlaw City ran up towards his car and shot him in his face. Lil Lay was instantly rushed to the hospital where he underwent surgery. Fortunately, Lil Lay survived the shooting but sadly lost sight of his left eye. However, he was really lucky that he survived the shot. The one who was rumored to shoot Lil Lay in the eye was a stone from Outlaw City called Lil Mo. He was basically a send-off, who Outlaw City gave another gun to and said he had to go and do it. Lil Mo is still alive and is rumored to have left the gang life behind him. Lil Lay brother King Rico came and visited him at the hospital, where Lil Lay probably told what happened, and who it was that shot, because the next day his brother would take revenge on Sircon City gangsters. On September 24, 2006, a day after Lil Lay was shot in the eye, his brother King Rico retaliated by killing Damien from Sircon City. Damian Kendricks was shot and killed in an alley near 76th and Dorchester in the Grand Crossing neighborhood on Chicago's south side. Witnesses said they saw 4 men with hoodies pulled over their heads running from the scene holding guns, according to police. Only one of the men named by witnesses, Rico Clark, was convicted of the crime and sentenced to 55 years in prison. The witnesses who pointed him out were Kevin and Demetrius from Sircon City gangsters. According to witnesses, 3 of the others who were at the scene when Damien was murdered were Bodie, Cello and Corey from Pockettown. A witness even claimed that Corey shot at the victim along with King Rico. However, Somehow Corey was never convicted of the murder. Cello, Bodie, Corey, Lil Lay and King Rico were really the main ones from the pocket putting in work back in the day. Today, 3 of them is locked up for murder, 1 is coming out 2030 and 1 is dead. Demetrius from Sircon City seems to be a bit of a notorious snitch. However, I'm pretty sure Sircon City does not claim him anymore, provided they ever did. Years after Demetrius snitched on King Rico, Demetrius himself ended up in prison in 2016. In prison, he had a Terror Dome Stone, BBG, as cellmate. The BBG member, whose real name was Dwight Boone Doty, boasted about him killing a 9-year-old boy, Tyshawn Lee, whose father was a very respected Kill Award GD. Demetrius recorded this conversation and further testified against him. The father of his son who was killed, allegedly took revenge on BBG. I will talk more about this in another video. King Rico, who was sentenced to 55 years in prison, has still maintained his innocence all these years. It's always on my mind what I'm doing locked up, Clark told Injustice Watch during a phone call from prison. Because I had nothing to do with this, an Injustice Watch investigation found that the case against Clark included problems often seen in wrongful convictions, including allegations of police coercion, recanted witness statements, and inadequate defense. Even Lil Lay, who is now 33 years old today, claims his innocence, and which actually seems to be somewhat true. Back in 2009, Lil Lay and some younger Pockettown members were in a shootout. The youngins would later all get arrested, but Lil Lay ended up taking the charges for them. The shorties got sentenced to 4 years each, while Lil Lay got sentenced to 24 years in prison on 2 counts of aggravated battery with a firearm. He got a consecutive 12-year sentence for each count and will be released in 2030. This is one of many reasons why Lil Lay is so respected in Pockettown and on the east side as a whole. Now we've got to one of Pockettown's rival gangs, the Sircon City Gangsters. Just as I mentioned earlier, the Cirques also has a rich history. Sircon City, also known as 1400D, Jono World, Pharaoh Gang, Rob Lock or Suto Way. All those names we will get into a little later in the story. Another name for Sircon City is OTS, which stands for Only the Cirques and is based on purebreds from the gangster Disciple Nation. However, back in the 70s, Sircon City were based as an independent alliance called Sircon Disciples, which today has died out. Today most members claim GD or OTS. Sircon's main area is 73rd and Dorchester, but the area they control ranges from 71st to 76th and Kenwood to Dorchester. What's interesting about the Sircon City Gangsters is that they hardly have any allies, at least not some gang worth mentioning. Many speculate if No Limit and Sircon are allies. They are not. They are cordial with each other and many members know each other, but they do not help each other. There are also groups within the gangs that absolutely do not like each other. Many shorties from No Limit have had conflicts with shorties from Sircon, which has been close to breaking out in full war between the gangs. However, older and more experienced members have managed to prevent something big to happen. As you have probably heard in several of G Herbo's songs, many in No Limit is GDK. Members like Mineski, Mally, Cairo and Herbo himself have claimed GDK, even though there are members of No Limit who claim GD. However, this is not meant for Sircon but rather Pockettown, KTS and Lakeside. However, it is not very popular among the Sircon members to hear No Limit claim it, and several shorties even claim it LMBK. It is more the older ones who do not care and keep it calm between the two. The gang that is actually closest to Sircon City is Gotti World, which I have touched on in previous videos. Gotti World, also known as 8x13 or Hottie Way. Hottie Way is basically a gang consisting of members from D Block, E Block, 7 Deuce and of course Gotti World. Many of those gangs can later be linked to conflicts and members on the south side. Nella from Hottie Way is very close to Wooski from STL/EBT, who also claims Hottie Way. Wooski even said 400 East in the song Computers. Both have slid together many times, which allegedly resulted in the murder of Lil Chris from 400 East, as well as the shooting in the leg of Duke from O Block just months after the murder of Can't Get Right. So there are plenty of connections. Almost all gangs throughout Chicago have some sort of connection between them. Gotti World was formed after a member named Gotti from 8x13 was shot and killed by KTS Vaughn, Spook, Ronnie Mo and Jerry from Pockettown in April 2011. Paxtown is also cordial with Sircon City and several members are cool with each other. Apart from Paxtown and Hottie Way, Sircon City is literally surrounded by enemies. Their territory borders on gangs like Zoland, Moose Block, Guap Gang, Mix Mob, E Block and of course Pockettown, with which they have had a 2-decade-long war. What's really crazy is that Sircon City shares a piece of their territory with a gang called Will City. The gang was formed after Baba was killed in 2009 by Sircon City. The group is based on 71st and Blackstone in Sircon's territory and is going by Woolyville, or Will City, and consists of members who claim BD. 1 year later, in August 2010, Cello and Bodie from Pockettown/Will City killed Stoney Tony, or Booby Stone, from Sircon City. Both were charged with the drive-by shooting and the parole date is set to be 2053 for the driver Bodie, and 2078 for the shooter Cello. Bodie and Cello was told on by Michi from Sircon City. Booby Stone from Sircon came from a large family from the neighborhood called the Kaiser family that formed a large part of Sircon City's OGs back in the day. 9 years before Booby Stone was killed, another member of the Kaiser family was shot dead at a gas station, Black Dougie. A year later, a friend of Dougie took revenge and killed Black Dougie's alleged killer, 28-year-old Layman, who some claim were from the Pockettown neighborhood while other claims it was something internal since he was murdered in Sircon territory. The alleged killer in the murder of Layman was actually arrested and sent to 65 years in prison. However, there is much to suggest that the convicted person is innocent after new DNA evidence as well as original witness statements. The police investigated the murder very quickly and searched for a person with the nickname Black and then found a person with that nickname, and the court convicted him of the murder despite 6 witnesses pointing to the opposite. Antonio Porter, who was charged and convicted of the murder, is today trying to prove his innocence. There is a very interesting article about this from 2018 in ABC News. In October 2013, another member of the Kaiser family was killed. He was also a member of the Sircon City Gangsters. His name was Tavake and he was called Trife. Trife was shot dead with shots to the head by 2 unknown offenders. Trife was a rapper from Sircon City, and an interesting fact is that he actually used to record music in the same studio as L.A. Capone did. A month earlier outside the same studio, L.A. Capone was shot to death by Lil Mick from 051 Young Money. Larry Shachier and Kaiser, Trife's brother, said his brother created a positive vibe with his music, and the brothers created the non-profit Royalty 2Y to reach young people. Before being killed, Tavake Kaiser was working with his brother to edit his new video Respect the Youth, a song dedicated to young people killed in gun violence. It was ironic that the last thing he wanted in that video were scenes of emptiness, empty playgrounds, basketball courts, swings and school hallways. Now, he has become a victim of the violence, his brother said. Which gang was actually behind the murder of Trife is unknown, but there is much to suggest that it was Pockettown. Just like for Pockettown, music was very important to Sircon City. One of the more famous was Q Storm from Sircon City, who had good tracks with other rappers from Sircon like Chris G. Sadly, Q Storm was shot and killed by a security complex employee in 2010. Another rapper from the Cirques was Jodaboy. He was an older member and was really the link between the old and new generation of Sircon City members. However, Jodaboy is rumored to have left the criminal life behind to focus on the family, this after a series of assassination attempts on him. Another rapper who is originally from Sircon City, but who is now actually claiming global gangsters, is Jojo Capone, who I talked about earlier. However, he seems to stand above the beef with Pockettown and is still cool with several Pockettown OGs like Gunsmoke. Jojo's story is actually quite remarkable. He is an OG GD with a lot of connections in the industry, and acted as a muscle for a lot of rappers back in the day like The Game, Dipset, Mano, Bad Bye, and Cash Money. The Game even gave him a shout out in his song 300 Bars and Running, where he said, "You got robbed for your spinning G-Unit chain in Chicago. I call my man Jojo to get it back." I recommend you to listen to his interview in the podcast Flip the Script. Now back to the timeline. 2 years after the assassination of Damien from Sircon City in September 2006, Sircon City would take revenge on Pockettown by killing 16-year-old Lil Pez, or Lil Paris, from E-Block/Pockettown. Lil Paris, whose real name was Paris Bassett, was walking early Monday morning in the 1300 block of East 72nd Street, when an unknown assailant creeped up on him and shot him point blank in the head. Police tragically later found him dead on the sidewalk. Paris was a loved member from the East End, and Pockettown later adopted the nickname Lil Pez City, LPC, to honor his memory. This murder is a very important event in history, as it would cause a lot of violence between Sircon City and Pockettown. Just 2 months after the murder of Lil Paris, Sircon City would strike again. This time a girl was shot dead and another girl shot but luckily survived. Her name was Sharkelia Taylor, but she was called Queen Lady Shaw and was from Pockettown/Solent. Apparently Lady Shaw was walking with a friend on the 6900 block of South Dorchester to visit her grandmother for Memorial Day weekend. Suddenly a Chevy Monte Carlo pulled up on the scene and started firing at Lady Shaw and her friend. Lady Shaw was fatally hit and pronounced dead at Northwestern Memorial Hospital just before midnight. Lady Shaw was from ABM and claimed 4.C.H, but was also close with Pockettown members and had family ties from around that area. The murder of Lady Shaw is really the true reason why the brutal war between Pockettown and Sircon City gangsters started. Sure, it was murders before this between the gangs, but it was not seen as a thing between Sircon City and Pockettown, but was seen more as personal reasons behind those murders. After the murder of Lady Shaw, It was really on sight no matter which member you saw from the other gang. The murder of Lady Shaw seemed to be a mistake by the Sircon City gangsters. Because of that, and many other mistakes from both sides, the war was created. It's really incredibly sad. I've also heard from members from both sides that they found crates with all sorts of guns put out on the street, which they suspected were put out by the police, or the feds, because they wanted people to kill each other. Back when the older members were around 12 to 13 years old, they used to get beat up pretty badly by police, and this is how it is around the world. This is nothing new. This has long been known. A group of Taylor's friends who live in the neighborhood gathered to comfort each other and pray at the spot where she was gunned down. They say she never got into trouble and was a loyal friend. She was a good friend. We always joke around, play, and just talk all the time. She was cool. I will miss her, though, said one of her friends. It tears at your heart. We just hear far too much of it. The primary concern should be school and making friends, and we should not have to worry about the kind of adult dangers they are faced with, said Michael Collins, Dunbar Pulaski MS principal. Taylor was a popular 8th grader who played on the school's basketball team for a time. It hits really in the gut, it hits home, and maybe some of our kids are going to realize what's going on today because it's interesting. So one day, or 1 minute, and the next few seconds, you're gone, said Taylor's coach Mary Aaron. It is known that it was Sircon City gangsters who was behind this murder. However, Lady Shaw was not the intended target. She just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was not supposed to be outside. She sneaked out from her house with her friend to hang with the guys from Chestnut/Snowland. Pockettown later adopted the nickname Shaw City to honor her memory. After the murders of Lil Pez and Lady Shaw, the whole east side escalated. The war with no limit took off. More bodies dropped between Pockettown and the Cirques, and Pockettown/KTS created Gotti World after KTS Vaughn, Spook, Ronnie Mo and Jerry from Pockettown allegedly killed Gotti from 8x13. Jerry later got shot by Sircon City. Fortunately, he survived. After the murder of Booby Stone, who was killed by Cello and Bodie in 2010, which I told you about earlier, and which Cello and Bodie ended up getting locked up for, and after the murder of Gotti from 8x13, hell broke loose in Pockettown. In less than a month, Pockettown lost 3 members, Shorty Doo-Wop, Corey, or CEO, and Moose from LPC. Shorty Doo-Wop was shot and killed on May 22, 2012. Allegedly by Sircon City gangsters. He was shot by an armed robber at the 7000 block of South Perry Avenue in Englewood. According to police, he died from a gunshot wound to the back. In a news article about Doo-Wop, whose real name was Richard Wilson, his mother, who did not want to be named, said Doo-Wop was able to touch the lives of young teens through his work with the drill team. He was a real good go-to person, she said. He'd give a lot of people advice. Young kids were very much into him. Sarah Vlodczyk, administrative director of the South Shore drill team, said Doo-Wop was a great performer who loved the group. Wilson's sister, Rashida Wilson, agreed. He helped young kids who were struggling on the streets. He helped them to get off the streets and have a place to go, she said. His sister said her brother also loved music and dancing and had just started managing several local groups that were trying to break into the music industry. He loved to dance. He was just a well-rounded person. Very happy-go-lucky, said his mother. Wilson also left behind a 4-year-old daughter. He loved that little girl, Rashida Wilson said. He was very loving and a family kind of person. Another interesting detail about Shorty Doo-Wop is that he was manager of S. From 600 and Duke the Beast from 071 Tay City. S. Still pays homage to him to this day. Who actually killed Shorty Doo-Wop is unknown. Much is actually unknown from that time, especially from Pockettown and Sircon City Gangster. Both gangs basically moved around like the mob. Now we've come to a very important event in this story, and it's the murder of Corey, or CEO, from Pockettown. I'll now tell the true story of why Corey was not charged with King Rico in the murder of Damien from Sircon City, and why Corey was later killed when he came out. Corey, whose real name was Corey Manuel, was shot and killed on May 27, 2012 in Harvey. He was later pronounced dead at 3:59 a.m. at Advocate Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn. The reason Corey beat the case despite being identified by 2 witnesses is because he allegedly snitched on King Rico. However, he never took the stand. It's like the Take Capone incident all over. This was allegedly one of the reasons why King Rico was eventually convicted and sentenced to 55 years in prison. When Corey was later beaten the case and war released in 2012, he was almost immediately murdered, but not by those who many believe. Most people think that the Sircon City gangsters were behind the murder, which may still be true. However, what I have heard, and what was the real reason, is that it was older members of Pockettown, PTC, who killed Corey, on orders from King Rico and Lil Lay from inside the prison. Those rumored to have killed Corey were E-Man and Timo from Pockettown, PTC. They were some of the faces for Pockettown back then. Today both are around the age of 30. E-Man is still around but moves low-key nowadays. As many of you know, Corey was still a highly respected member, and Pockettown adopted the nickname Coreytown to honor his memory, as most of Pockettown's members claim to this day. Now many are probably wondering why members claim Coreytown, even though he allegedly snitched, and allegedly killed by older Pockettown members. When Corey was killed, there were actually small internal conflicts. However, many didn't even know that the older Pockettown members did. Some still believed it was the Sircon City gangsters. Many also did not believe that Corey snitched, which is why many claim Coreytown today. The whole situation is very complicated, but as I said before, back then, Pockettown moved around like the mob. They had structure and leadership. Back then, in 2010 to 2012, Lil Lay, Jamar, King Rico and Lil Ant pretty much bullied the older members and even made them move around. After the murder of Corey, Ant, Jamar, Rico, Lay and other members took over. Now it was they who ran the pocket. Some older guys even flipped and became members of Sircon City. This was also around the time the new breeds came around from out west. Through that connection, Pockettown made a lot of money. Most people who claim Coreytown today know that he allegedly snitched, but this was a time before social media and all that stuff. So many looked past those allegations and claimed Coreytown anyway to honor him and his family. However, this theory is just speculation. It may very well be false and that it was actually Sircon City behind it. You get to choose for yourself what you believe in. Just a month later, Moose from LPC Pockettown was killed. Here, too, it has long been rumored that it was the Sircon City gangsters who were behind the murder of Moose, but that is false since members from Pockettown actually got caught for this. Moose, 16, whose real name was Douglas Bufford, was shot and killed during a home invasion on the 1400 block of East 73rd Street. Moose was shot in the back of his head with a shotgun. On July 25, 2012, a couple of members of the LPC were out playing basketball when Moose suddenly came by and said he would go to enemy territory and shoot someone from the Sircon Mafia. Jarmel Brown and Anthony Howell, two members of the LPC, told Moose that they were accompanying him. However, Anthony claimed in police reports that he followed to try to stop Moose because he was tweaking. Moose, Jarmel and Anthony went over to Sircon City territory and decided to hit a lick, which means they would rob someone. They went to an apartment building on the 1400 block of East 73rd Street where the intended victim lived. His name was Dondra Sharkey. Dondra Sharkey testified that, in July 2012, he lived in an apartment building owned by his grandparents located on East 73rd Street. At that time, two rival factions of the gangster Disciples Street Gang, Lil Paris City, LPC, and Sircon Mafia, were engaged in an ongoing war. Dondra testified that Stony Island Avenue was the boundary between the factions' territories and that the LPC faction controlled the area east of Stony Island while the Sircon Mafia controlled the area west of Stony Island. The building that Sharkey lived in was located a block west of Stony Island. Dondra testified that, although he was not a member of the Sircon Mafia, he hung out with members of the gang and did not cross Stony Island for fear of being shot, robbed, or kidnapped. On July 25, 2012, Dondra was sitting in his room watching television when he looked up and saw a person, whom he identified in court as the defendant, Jarmel Brown, standing a foot away from him. The defendant did not have his face covered, but he had a blue shirt around his neck and was holding the ends of the shirt with his hands. The defendant told Dondra to stand up, and another man, 16-year-old Douglas Bufford, entered the room with a revolver in his hand, a red hat on his head, and a white shirt tied around his face. When Bufford told Dondra to stand up, another person appeared in the doorway with a shotgun in his hands, a white shirt covering his face, and a hairstyle of short dreadlocks. Dondra testified that he could see another person looking into the room from the hallway. The person with the shotgun told Dondra to get up and stand by the refrigerator. As Dondra stood up and began walking toward the kitchen, the shotgun discharged and Bufford was struck in the head. Dondra ran to his grandparents' apartment and saw the person who had been holding the shotgun run toward Stony Island. He also saw the defendant run the other way toward the viaduct. Douglas Bufford, or Moose, sadly died from his wounds 3 days later. Two members were charged and later convicted of the murder, and they were Jarmel Brown and Anthony Hull from LPC. Both were charged with first-degree murder, home invasion and burglary. Jarmel was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Anthony, who was the shooter, was sentenced to 35 years in prison. According to Dondra, Jamali was the first to come into the apartment, without a weapon. Douglas then came in with a handgun and then Anthony came in with a shotgun. When you read the police investigation, this sounds like a mistake and that Anthony happened to shoot Douglas, probably through poor trigger discipline. However, many believe that Jamali, also known as Mally, and Anthony knowingly killed Moose and it was because of a girl. This makes some sense because who is pointing a damn shotgun at someone's head during a home invasion and then running away? To me it sounds very strange, but of course, there are those with horrible gun control. After the murder of Douglas, Moose Block was formed to honor his memory. They are very close with Pockettown despite it being LPC members who killed him. You can compare it to Taekwon World and Jaro City. Taekwon World is cool with Jaro City despite that it was they who killed Taekwon in 2012. Moose Block is a very serious gang that has put in tons of work that we will get to in part 2. This was the first part of the story of Pockettown. This part was largely about history, how the wars started and other important incidents. Part 2 will be about Danny G and Spook from Pockettown, the war with No Limit and Sircon City gangsters and other incidents. Hope you liked the first part. Feel free to leave a comment and like, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel. This video took an incredible amount of time to do. The research I had to do before this video was very difficult because this particular story is very unknown. Rest in peace everyone who has fallen victim to gang violence in Chicago and around the world.